Welcome to our channel. Sit back and enjoy this video, and don't forget to add your comments. We promise to bring more videos that will make your watching worthwhile. If you like more of this video narrative, subscribe to our channel, like, comment, and tap the notification button so you don't miss any of our videos. Let's dive into the storytelling. Hope always arrived before the sun, at 5:30 every morning. While Soul still slept beneath a veil of quiet, she stood at the iron gates of the Kong estate, hands folded around the strap of her worn handbag. The mansion rose before her like a fortress, glass, steel, and stone, cold to the eye, powerful in presence. To most people, it was the home of a man they whispered about in fear. To Hope, it was simply work. Before she pressed the intercom, she bowed her head. "Lord," she whispered, her Nigerian accent soft and careful, "order my steps today. Let my hands bring peace into this house." The gates opened without a word. Inside, the house was always spotless, but Hope cleaned it as though God himself might walk through the doors at any moment. She dusted slowly, deliberately. She wiped surfaces with care. She treated every room with the same reverence she once gave the small church back home, the one with cracked walls and wooden benches, where she learned that dignity did not come from wealth, but from obedience. She hummed hymns under her breath as she worked. Old ones. Songs her mother used to sing while cooking, while braiding hair, while whispering prayers over sleeping children. Hope never knew which rooms he was in. She never asked. But Kong Junseo always knew where she was. From the second-floor balcony, he watched her move through the living room below. She wore the same modest uniform every day, long sleeves, long skirt, hair pulled back neatly. Nothing about her invited attention, and yet she commanded it. She paused before entering his private study. Junseo stilled. Hope placed her cleaning supplies down and closed her eyes. She prayed again, not loudly, not dramatically, just a moment of stillness, like she was asking permission from something unseen. Something about it unsettled him. He had seen men beg for their lives. He had watched rivals kneel, cry, bleed. None of that disturbed him the way this woman's quiet faith did. Because it wasn't fear that bent her head, it was trust. She entered the study and began to clean. Junseo turned away before she could notice him watching. He adjusted the collar of his black shirt, fingers brushing the edge of the tattoo that crept up his neck, inked scripture tangled with symbols of his past. A contradiction etched into skin. A man like him had no business noticing a housekeeper. Yet every Sunday, when he sat in the back pew of a small church across town, he found his thoughts drifting back to her. Hope. He learned her name by accident. One of the staff mentioned it casually, unaware that the boss was listening. Hope, a name too soft for the world he ruled. She worked efficiently, never lingering, never touching anything that wasn't hers to touch. She avoided eye contact when he passed through the halls. But when she did look up, just once, just briefly, Junseo saw something that made his chest tighten. Not fear, strength, the kind forged in loss and survival. At exactly 8:30, Hope packed her things. She always left early. Other staff stayed longer. Some lingered, hoping to be noticed, hoping for favor. Hope never did. She bowed politely, offered a quiet, "Have a good day," and disappeared through the gates like a ghost. Junseo watched her leave from the security monitors. Follow her, he told no one. But he didn't mean it the way his men usually understood. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the Bible resting on his desk. The leather cover was worn, pages marked and folded. A habit he never explained. A faith no one dared question. "What are you trying to show me?" he muttered. Hope didn't know that the man whose floors she scrubbed carried blood on his hands. She didn't know how many lives bowed to his command. And Junseo didn't know why the presence of one woman, quiet, foreign, unassuming, made him feel more exposed than all his enemies combined. Across the city, Hope walked quickly, clutching her bag tighter as she descended the subway steps. She was running late. Her heart beat faster, not with fear, but urgency. Because waiting for her, in a small apartment filled with sunlight and prayer, was the reason she woke before dawn every day. The reason she endured silence. The reason she believed God still had a plan. Hope smiled to herself as she climbed the stairs. "Mommy's coming," she whispered. And somewhere far away, a mafia boss with white hair and a God-fearing heart stood at his window, unaware that the smallest life he had never met was about to change everything. Hope's apartment was small, but it breathed. Sunlight spilled through thin curtains, pooling on the wooden floor in soft gold. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and last night's rice. A framed verse hung crooked near the door. Those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. It had been there so long that Hope no longer noticed the crack in the glass. She stepped inside and locked the door behind her, finally letting her shoulders drop. "Mama!" The voice came fast, bare feet slapping against the floor, arms already outstretched. Hope barely had time to set her bag down before a small body collided with her legs. She laughed, the sound breaking free like it had been waiting all morning. "Slow down, my sunshine," she said, crouching to scoop the child up. "You'll knock Mama over one day." "I don't care," the girl declared, pressing her cheek against Hope's. "I missed you." Hope closed her eyes. This was the reward for every early morning, every bowed head, every swallowed insult. She inhaled the familiar scent of cocoa butter and baby shampoo, grounding herself. "I missed you too," she whispered. The girl pulled back just enough to look at her. She had Hope's eyes, large, dark, observant, but her father's pale skin and soft brown hair that curled no matter how tightly Hope braided it. A living blend of two worlds that were never meant to meet. "Did you pray at work?" the child asked seriously. Hope smiled. "Of course. For the house." "Yes." "For the scary man?" Hope stilled, just a fraction. The girl tilted her head. "Auntie Grace says he's scary." Hope brushed a curl from her daughter's forehead. "Auntie Grace talks too much." "But did you pray for him?" Hope hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." The girl beamed. "Good. Jesus loves everyone." Hope's chest tightened. "Yes," she said softly. "He does." Across the city, Kang Junseo stood motionless in front of a mirror he didn't need. His white hair was still damp from the shower, slicked back with practiced precision. The suit he wore was custom-tailored, black as sin, sharp enough to cut. Every inch of him was control, measured, intentional, dangerous. And yet his mind was not on the meeting scheduled in 20 minutes. It was on a woman kneeling in silence. He adjusted his cufflinks and turned away, irritation crawling under his skin. This was stupid. Hope was an employee, nothing more. One of many faces that passed through his world unnoticed. He had survived betrayals, wars, prison, and bloodshed. He did not unravel over a housekeeper's prayers. Still, he reached for the Bible on his desk. The leather creaked as he opened it, falling naturally to a page already marked. His fingers traced the margin where he had underlined a verse long ago, back when he still believed redemption was something you earned with suffering. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Junseo shut the book. He didn't believe in light anymore, but he believed in power. And Hope had it. Quiet, infuriating, unshakable. "Sir." His right-hand man, Min-jae, stood at the door. Loyal, efficient, dangerous in his own way. "The investors from Busan are here." Junseo nodded once. "Send them in." As the men entered, laughter followed. Too loud, too forced. They bowed, exchanged pleasantries, sat. Business began. Numbers. Territories. Influence. Blood disguised as contracts. Junseo listened, responded, dominated the room without raising his voice. This was where he belonged. This was the world that made sense. And yet, between sentences, his mind drifted. Hope wiping his desk as though it mattered. Hope praying before entering his space. Hope leaving without ever looking back. The meeting ended with handshakes and false smiles. As the door closed, Min-jae lingered. "Sir," he said carefully, "is everything all right?" Junseo studied him. Min-jae had known him for years, seen him in moments no one else survived. "Why do people pray?" Junseo asked suddenly. Min-jae blinked. "Sir, why?" Junseo repeated. "Would someone kneel before a God who does not intervene?" Silence stretched. Finally, Min-jae said, "Maybe, because they trust him." Junseo let out a short, humorless breath. "Trust is weakness." "Not always," Min-jae replied before he could stop himself. Junseo's gaze sharpened. Min-jae lowered his head. "Forgive me." Junseo waved him off. "Leave." Alone again, Junseo stared at the city beyond his window. Seoul sprawled beneath him, alive, ruthless, beautiful. Somewhere in that maze, Hope was living her life. And he didn't like that. He wanted to know how. That evening, Hope cooked with one arm wrapped protectively around her daughter's waist as the girl perched on a stool beside the counter. Careful, Hope warned. Hot. I know, the girl said solemnly, then immediately reached too close. Hope pulled her back just in time. You will give Mama gray hair. You already have some, the girl observed. Hope laughed. This child. They ate together at the small table, hands clasped in prayer before every meal. The girl prayed loudly, confidently. Thank you, Jesus, for food and Mama and school, and please bless the scary man's house, and help Mama not be tired. Amen. Hope opened her eyes slowly. You pray very big prayers, she said. The girl shrugged. Jesus is big. After dinner, Hope bathed her, braided her hair, tucked her into bed. The girl yawned, eyelids heavy. Mama. Yes, my love. Why? Do you go to that house every day? Hope sat on the edge of the bed. Because God opened that door. Do you like it? Hope considered the question honestly. It is hard, she said. But God is there. The girl nodded as if that explained everything. Then it's okay. Hope kissed her forehead. Sleep. When the apartment finally fell quiet, Hope knelt beside her own bed. Her knees ached. Her hands trembled. Lord, she whispered, the strength of the day finally gone. I am tired. Tears slipped free, silent and hot. I am trying to do everything right. I am trusting you. Please, do not let my child pay for my obedience. She bowed her head lower. And if that man, she hesitated, if he is as broken as he feels, then have mercy on him too. She stayed there a long time. Late that night, Juncio stood in a church that smelled of old wood and incense. The pews were nearly empty. He sat in the back, as always. The pastor spoke about forgiveness, about chains that weren't visible, about grace that didn't make sense. Juncio listened with arms crossed, jaw tight. Grace was for fools. And yet, when the service ended, he didn't leave right away. He stared at the cross at the front of the room, memories surfacing uninvited. A boy kneeling beside his mother, hands stained with blood that wasn't his yet. A promise whispered into darkness. If you get me out of this, I will never forget you. He had forgotten. Or maybe he had remembered too well. Juncio stood abruptly and walked out into the night. As he stepped into his car, his phone buzzed. A message from security. Housekeeper departed on schedule. No anomalies. Juncio stared at the screen. Then, slowly he typed. Find out where she goes. Quietly, he set the phone down, heart beating harder than it should have. Somewhere, Hope slept with her child wrapped in light and prayer. And the distance between them, once vast and unbridgeable, had begun to close. Not with violence, not with desire, but with something far more dangerous. Faith. Hope always knew when a day was about to change her life. Not because of omens or visions. She didn't believe God worked like that. But because the air would feel different. Like the world was holding its breath, waiting to see what she would do. That morning, the sky over Seoul was the color of wet concrete. Wind pressed against her coat as she climbed the hill toward the Kong estate, her handbag tucked under her arm, her steps steady. She arrived at 5:30, as always. Hands folded around the strap, head bowed. Lord, she whispered, order my steps today. Let my hands bring peace into this house. Let me not speak what I shouldn't. Let me not fear what I see. The gates opened without a word. And as she stepped onto the immaculate path leading to the mansion, Hope felt it again. That strange pressure in her chest. Like someone else was praying too, only with different words. Inside, the house greeted her with its usual silence. The floor tiles were cold beneath her shoes. The chandelier lights above were still dim, like the house itself wasn't fully awake. A few staff members moved quietly in the distance. Security, kitchen, the driver, faces smooth and blank, trained to exist without being seen. Hope entered the supply room, put on her gloves, tied her apron, and began her route. Entry hall, dining room, living room. She dusted, wiped, polished. Every movement was deliberate. Every room was treated like an altar. She hummed under her breath, an old hymn her mother loved, soft and broken in the quiet air. And though she kept her eyes down, she felt it. Someone watching. Not the staff. Not the cameras. Him. Hope had seen Kong Juncio only a handful of times up close. The first time she did, she nearly dropped a tray of glassware. Not because he was handsome, though he was in the way men like him tended to be, sharp and polished like a weapon. Not because he was rich, but because his presence was heavy, like walking into a room where an argument had just ended, where the air still carried the memory of anger. He had white hair that didn't belong to a young man. It looked unnatural, but it suited him, like he'd made peace with being an exception. His eyes were the kind that made people forget their own names, the kind that measured you without moving. He never spoke to her, but Hope had learned something about quiet men. Silence could be a language too. She moved toward his private hallway and stopped. A door was open. It shouldn't have been. The staff knew better. His study was never left open, not even by mistake. Not even when he wasn't home. Not even when he was asleep. Hope stood there for a moment, her heart tapping out a warning. She stared at the dark space beyond the doorway. She didn't step inside. Not yet. Instead, she closed her eyes. "Lord," she whispered, "if this is not for me, close it." The silence didn't change. So she took one slow breath, tightened her grip on her cleaning cloth, and entered. The study smelled like expensive paper and something faintly bitter, coffee or cologne or both. A wall of books rose behind the desk. The desk itself was black wood, spotless but lived in, like someone who didn't tolerate mess still managed to leave fingerprints on power. Hope began the way she always did, from the perimeter inward. She dusted the shelves carefully. She wiped the framed photographs she never looked at too long. She cleaned the glass display case at the far end of the room, filled with objects that looked ceremonial but felt wrong. And then she reached the desk. Her hand slowed. A Bible rested near the corner, worn and soft at the edges, pages curled as if they'd been turned too many times by someone who didn't want anyone to know he did it. Hope stared at it before she could stop herself. She shouldn't touch it. She never touched anything personal. But dust was dust, and she was here to do her job. She wiped around it, careful, respectful. Then a paper beneath it shifted slightly. Hope froze. A photograph, half hidden under the Bible. It had been covered on purpose. Her heart thudded once. Hope wasn't curious by nature. Curiosity had been dangerous in her life. Curiosity had cost people things. But something in her, something that felt like warning and pull at the same time, moved her fingers before her mind could stop them. She nudged the Bible just slightly to put the photograph back in place, and saw it. A young boy, Korean, maybe 8 or 9, standing beside a woman in a simple dress, her hair pulled back, her face tired but proud. The boy's eyes were different, not innocent, already guarded, already carrying too much. Hope's throat tightened, because she recognized that look. It was the look of a child who had learned early that love didn't always protect you. Hope swallowed, gently slid the Bible back where it had been, and stepped away from the desk as though she'd never seen anything. And that's when she heard it. A soft click. The door behind her closed. Hope turned. Kong Junseo stood there. For a heartbeat, the room became smaller. He didn't look angry. That was worse. His face was composed, unreadable, but his eyes were fixed on her like she was a problem he'd been avoiding and suddenly decided to solve. Hope's mouth went dry. She bowed immediately, deep and respectful. "Good morning, sir." Junseo didn't answer right away. He took a step into the room, slow, controlled, as if he knew the floor belonged to him and the air would move for him if he demanded it. His gaze flicked to her cleaning supplies, then to the desk, then back to her face. "Why do you pray?" he asked. Hope blinked. Her head lifted before she could stop herself. His question was quiet, almost casual, but the room felt like a courtroom. Hope lowered her eyes again. "Because I need God," she said softly. Junseo's jaw tightened slightly. Everyone needs something. Hope didn't respond. She had learned that silence could be an offering too. Junseo moved past her, stopping beside the desk. He picked up the Bible, weighted in one hand like it was heavier than leather and paper. "Do you think prayer changes things?" he asked. Hope's fingers curled against her apron. "Yes," she said, "even for people who don't deserve it." Hope's heart paused. She took a breath. "I don't pray because people deserve it," she said carefully. "I pray because God is good." For the first time, something shifted in Junseo's expression, like a crack in a wall that had been standing too long. His eyes narrowed, but not in anger. In curiosity. "Where did you learn to speak like that?" he asked. Hope swallowed. "Church." "Which church?" Hope hesitated, then answered honestly. "A small one near the river." Junseo looked down at the Bible again. "Do you pray for me?" he asked. Hope's lungs tightened. This was dangerous territory. Dangerous questions. Dangerous intimacy. But she had learned something else too. When a person asked you about prayer, sometimes it wasn't about religion. Sometimes it was a cry. Yes, she said quietly. I do. Junseo's eyes lifted to hers again. I don't need it, he said. Hope held his gaze for half a second, only half. Then she lowered her eyes again. Everyone needs it, she whispered. A long silence sat between them. Then Junseo spoke, voice low. You can leave early today. Hope's stomach dropped. Leaving early meant something was wrong. Leaving early meant she had crossed a line without knowing it. Yes, sir, she said quickly. Thank you, sir. She moved toward her supplies. Hope, he said. She froze. No one said her name in this house unless they had a reason. She turned back, careful. He was still holding the Bible. How old are you? He asked. Hope blinked, startled. Sir. He didn't repeat himself, just waited. Hope chose the safest answer. 30. Junseo's gaze traveled over her face with the same cold precision he probably used to evaluate threats. You have a child, he said suddenly. Hope's blood turned to ice. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. She couldn't look up. In an instant, her world narrowed to one thought. How does he know? Junseo watched her reaction like he had expected it. Like this was the reason he asked. You wear a ring line on your finger, he continued, almost clinically. But no ring. Your hands are rough, but not from youth. Your schedule is strict. And you leave early every day like you're racing something. Hope's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Junseo stepped closer, just one step. Not threatening, but close enough to remind her who owned the air. What is her name? He asked. Hope's hands trembled. He didn't say child. He said her. Hope didn't know why that mattered, but it did. She swallowed hard. I don't understand why you ask, she said. Junseo's eyes didn't change. Answer, he said. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Hope's chest felt tight, squeezed by fear and instinct. But she also remembered her prayer at the gate. Let me not fear what I see. She took a breath. Adeola, she said quietly. It was her daughter's name. A name that meant crown of honor. A name Hope had given her because she refused to let the world treat the child like a mistake. Junseo stared at her like the name had struck something inside him. Adeola, he repeated, testing the syllables. Not Korean. Hope's voice was steady now, though her heart wasn't. She is Nigerian, Hope said, and then added, because it was the truth, and she is also part Korean. The room went silent in a way that felt sharp. Junseo's eyes didn't blink. For the first time, Hope saw something behind the mask. Not anger. Not judgment. Calculation. Hope immediately regretted speaking. I should go, she said quickly, reaching for her supplies. Thank you for letting me leave early. Junseo didn't stop her. He simply watched her walk out. And Hope didn't look back. Not once. Because she could feel, in her bones, that she had just stepped into a story that wasn't hers to control anymore. Hope's hands shook all the way down the hill. She kept her head down, her pace fast, her breath shallow. The subway station was crowded, but she felt alone inside her own skin. He knows. Not everything, but enough. How? Why? What did he want? Hope stared at her reflection in the subway window, her face calm, but her eyes wide with the kind of fear she didn't let people see. She pressed a hand over her chest. Lord, she whispered without sound, lips barely moving, cover me. Cover my child. She got off at her stop and climbed the stairs into the daylight. And then she started running. Adela's daycare was a bright building painted with cheerful murals, animals, flowers, smiling sun faces that promised safety. Hope burst through the door, breathless. The caregiver at the front desk smiled. Miss Hope, you're early. Hope forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Yes, she said. I'm early today. She didn't wait for small talk. She signed the paper with a shaky hand and walked quickly toward the playroom. Adeola spotted her instantly and squealed. Mama! She ran into Hope's arms and wrapped around her like she belonged there. Hope held her too tightly, almost crushing. Adeola giggled. Mama, you're squeezing me. Hope loosened her grip, but didn't let go. Sorry, she whispered, kissing her cheek. Mama missed you. Adeola pulled back and frowned. Are you crying? Hope touched her face and realized her cheeks were wet. She laughed too quickly. No. It's just the wind. Adeola didn't look convinced. Hope adjusted her daughter's backpack and took her hand. Come, let's go home. As they walked, Adeola skipped beside her, talking about a drawing she made, about a boy who tried to steal her snack, about a teacher who sang a funny song. Hope nodded at the right times. But her mind was elsewhere. Back in that study. Back in those eyes. Back in the moment her daughter's existence had been spoken aloud by a man who should never have known her name. That evening, Hope didn't cook right away. She sat at the table with her Bible open, reading words she had read 100 times, searching for something new. Adeola colored in a book beside her, humming softly. Hope's eyes landed on a passage in Psalms. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Hope swallowed. She had walked through valleys before. Nigeria had taught her what hunger looked like. Loss, fire, broken promises. But Soul had taught her something else. That you could be safe on paper and still be one bad decision away from disaster. Adeola looked up suddenly. Mama. Yes, my love. Do you think the scary man is lonely? Hope's chest tightened again. Why do you ask? She said carefully. Adeola shrugged, scribbling a crown on her drawing. Because when people are scary, sometimes they're sad inside. Hope stared at her daughter. Sometimes children saw things adults refused to. Hope brushed her fingers over Adela's braids. Maybe, she whispered. Adeola nodded, as if that was enough. Then she smiled. We can pray for him again. Hope's throat burned. Yes, she said softly. We will. Across the city, Kong Junseo sat in his office with Min Jae standing in front of him. The security monitors glowed on the wall, angles of hallways, gates, rooms. Silent witnesses. Min Jae's posture was stiff. Sir, you told me to gather information quietly. Junseo didn't look up from the file in his hand. Inside were photographs. A woman in a modest coat leaving the estate. A woman entering a subway station. A woman picking up a child from a daycare. Junseo's fingers tightened on the edge of the paper. The child in the photo was small, bright, smiling. And she had pale skin, soft brown hair, eyes like midnight. Min Jae hesitated. We stopped digging once we confirmed it wasn't a threat. Junseo's voice was calm. And the child? Min Jae swallowed. Her name is Adeola Hope Okafor. Junseo's jaw clenched. Hope had given her child her name too. Like a shield. Like a declaration. Min Jae continued, carefully. Her father is not listed on any record we could find. Hope is the legal guardian. No spouse. No partner. No relatives in Korea except one friend registered as an emergency contact. Junseo finally looked up. What friend? He asked. Grace Nwosu, Min Jae said. Nigerian. Works at a restaurant near Itaewon. Junseo stared at the screen behind Min Jae without seeing it. He should have felt nothing. He should have closed the file, returned to business, returned to blood and money and control. But something in him went still. Because the child's face had lodged itself into his mind like a splinter. A child. A mother. A faith that refused to die. Min Jae shifted. Sir, do you want us to stop watching? Junseo didn't answer immediately. Then, quietly, he said, bring me the address. Min Jae's eyes widened. Sir, I said bring it. Junseo snapped, the first sharpness in his voice all day. Min Jae bowed quickly. Yes, sir. When Min Jae left, Junseo stared down at the photograph again. Adeola. The name tasted unfamiliar. But the child's features were not unfamiliar at all. He had seen them before. In older photographs. In the mirror of his own past. In faces that belonged to men who had died under his command. And that was the problem. Because if the child was connected to him, connected to his world, then Hope was not just a housekeeper. She was a door. And doors could be opened. Or broken. Junseo's fingers brushed the Bible on his desk. He didn't open it. He just held it for a moment like it could stop him from doing what he always did. Then he made a decision anyway. He picked up his coat. That night, Hope heard footsteps outside her apartment door. At first, she thought it was her neighbor, the old woman who shuffled down the hall. But these steps were steady, measured, heavy. Hope's heart thumped. Adeola was already asleep, curled under her blanket with a stuffed bear tucked under her chin. Hope moved silently to the door and pressed her eye to the peephole. Her breath stopped. Kong Junseo stood in the hallway. Not with guards. Not with loud arrogance. Just him. In a black coat. Hair white against the dim building light. Face calm like he belonged anywhere he chose to stand. Hope's hands went cold. He lifted his gaze, directly toward the door, like he knew exactly where she was. Then he raised one hand. And knocked. 3 times. Hope backed away from the door, as if the sound had pushed her. Lord. Her throat tightened. Her mind raced through every worst possibility. He knew where she lived. He knew her daughter's name. He had come here himself. This was not curiosity. This was intent. She stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. Another knock, gentler this time, like he had all the patience in the world. Hope looked toward Adela's room. Her child slept peacefully, unaware that danger had just stepped into their hallway. Hope swallowed hard and whispered, barely audible, "Jesus." Then, with shaking hands, she unlocked the chain. Not all the way, just enough to open the door a few inches. The hallway light cut a narrow line across her face. Junseo's eyes met hers immediately. "Hope," he said quietly. Hearing her name in his voice felt like stepping off a cliff. Hope's lips trembled. "Sir, why are you here?" Junseo didn't smile. He didn't threaten. He simply looked past her, toward the darkness inside her apartment, and spoke words that made Hope's blood turn to ice. "I want to meet Adeola." Hope's breath left her body in one broken exhale. "No," she whispered instantly, the words sharp with fear. "No, you cannot." Junseo's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in something colder. "Why?" he asked. Hope's hand tightened on the door edge until her knuckles whitened. "Because you don't belong in her life. Because men like you don't touch children without leaving scars. Because whatever you want, it will cost me everything." But she didn't say any of that. She lifted her chin and spoke the only truth she could safely offer. "Because she is a child," Hope said, voice shaking. "And you are a stranger." Junseo stared at her for a long moment. Then, quietly, he said, "I'm not." Hope's heart stopped. In the thin slice of space between them, something terrible and inevitable took shape. Hope's voice dropped to a whisper. "Sir, please leave." Junseo didn't move. "Hope," he said softly, "I'm not here to hurt you." Hope's laugh was small and bitter, barely more than breath. "Do you hear yourself?" she whispered. "You are the kind of man people pray to be protected from." Junseo flinched, just slightly, like the words had struck skin. Hope continued, tears rising despite her efforts. "I work for you because I need money. Because I need to keep my child safe. But you cannot come to my home. You cannot bring your world to my door." Junseo's gaze stayed locked on hers. "And if your world is already connected to mine?" he asked. Hope went still. A chill crept up her spine. "Sir," she whispered, "what are you saying?" Junseo leaned forward slightly, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I'm saying the child looks like someone," he said. Hope's mouth went dry. "Someone who is dead," he added. Hope's vision blurred. Because now she understood. This wasn't about curiosity. This wasn't about kindness. This was about ghosts. And ghosts were always dangerous in his world. Hope's grip on the door trembled. In the next room, Adeola shifted in her sleep and mumbled something soft, her small voice wrapped in dreams. Hope's eyes flicked toward her daughter's room, then back to Junseo. And with more courage than she felt, Hope whispered, "Sir, whatever you think you see, you are wrong." Junseo watched her closely. Then he said calmly, "Let me in." Hope's breath hitched. She shook her head. "No." The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. Junseo's eyes darkened. "Hope," he said, voice still quiet but edged now, "I can make this easy, or I can make it hard." Hope's whole body trembled. But something rose inside her, something fierce and maternal and holy. She lifted her chin, tears spilling freely now. "Then make it hard," she whispered. Junseo stared at her like he had never seen anyone refuse him before, like the concept didn't fit inside his mind. Hope held his gaze. She didn't know if her courage would cost her. She didn't know if she was about to lose everything. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. No man, no matter how powerful, was allowed to step into her child's life without God's permission. And she would rather die than open the door to darkness. Junseo's expression shifted. Anger, frustration, something that looked almost like pain. Then he took one slow breath and stepped back. Hope didn't move, didn't blink, didn't exhale. He looked at her for a long moment, like he wanted to say something else. Then he spoke, quiet, final. "Tomorrow," he said, "we will talk." Hope's voice broke. "Please don't come back." Junseo's lips tightened. He turned, walked down the hallway, and disappeared into the stairwell without another word. Hope stood there shaking, the door still cracked open, as if she couldn't trust her hands to close it. Only when his footsteps faded completely did she lock it, chain it, press her back against it, and slide down to the floor. Her chest heaved. Her hands covered her mouth to keep from sobbing too loudly. Then she whispered into the dark, "Lord, what is happening?" In the distance, the city moved like nothing had changed. Cars passed. Lights blinked. People laughed. But in Hope's small apartment, the future had just knocked. And it had Kong Junseo's voice. And tomorrow, whether she wanted it or not, Hope would have to choose. To run, to fight, or to trust God into a storm she never asked for. Hope did not sleep. She lay on her side, one arm draped protectively over Adela's small body, listening to the rhythm of her daughter's breathing as if it were the only thing anchoring her to the world. Every sound outside the apartment, a passing car, footsteps in the hallway, the distant hum of the city, made her muscles tighten. She had locked the door twice, checked the windows, pulled the curtain back just enough to confirm the night was empty. Still, her heart would not slow. Because once a powerful man learned your address, safety became an illusion. Hope pressed her lips to Adela's hair and whispered a prayer so quiet it barely existed. "Lord, hide us." Adela shifted in her sleep, murmuring something soft and nonsensical, and Hope swallowed the sob rising in her throat. "Tomorrow," he said. Men like Kong Junseo did not say things they didn't mean. Morning came too quickly. Hope moved through her routine like someone underwater, brushing teeth, packing a small lunch, braiding Adela's hair with trembling fingers. Her daughter chatted happily, unaware that the world had tilted overnight. "Mama," Adela said as Hope tied the last ribbon. "Did the scary man come back?" Hope's hands stilled. "No," she said carefully. "Why?" Adela shrugged. "I dreamed he was standing outside. But he wasn't scary in the dream. He looked confused." Hope forced a smile. "Dreams are just dreams." Adela studied her for a moment with unsettling seriousness. "You're lying." Hope laughed weakly. "You're too smart." "I know," Adela said proudly. Hope pulled her into a hug, holding on longer than usual. At daycare, Hope lingered after drop-off, her eyes following Adela until she disappeared into the playroom. The caregiver smiled kindly. "Everything okay?" she asked. Hope nodded. "Yes, just tired." The woman chuckled. "Aren't we all?" Hope stepped back into the street, the weight of soul pressing in around her. She considered not going to work, considered running, packing what little she had, disappearing into another city, another life. But fear had taught her something long ago. Running only worked when the thing chasing you couldn't afford to wait. And Kong Junseo could afford anything. So she went. The gates opened as usual. The estate looked the same. Perfect, pristine, indifferent to the chaos it had just introduced into her life. But inside, something was wrong. The house was too quiet. No staff voices. No movement. Hope's steps slowed as she entered the main hall. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message. "You are not to clean today. Come to the study." Jay? Hope's stomach dropped. Her fingers hovered over the screen. Then she typed back with careful politeness. "Yes, sir." She slipped her phone away and stood still for a moment, head bowed. "Lord," she whispered, "I don't know how to do this. Please go before me." Then she walked toward the study. Junseo stood by the window when she entered. The room was bright with morning light, but it did nothing to soften him. He wore no jacket today, just a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing the dark ink along his forearms. Verses and symbols layered like a history he refused to erase. Hope stopped a few steps inside the door. She bowed. "You wanted to see me, sir?" "Yes," he said without turning. "Close the door." Hope hesitated. Then she did. The clicks sounded final. Junseo turned slowly, his gaze sharp but not cruel. "You didn't sleep," he said. Hope kept her eyes lowered. "I'm sorry if my work suffers today." "It won't," he replied. "You're not here to clean." Hope's heart pounded. "Then why am I here?" Junseo walked toward the desk and picked up a thin folder. "Because we need to talk about the past," he said. "And you're the only one left who can." Hope's breath caught. "I don't know what you think you know," she said carefully, "but I have done nothing wrong." Junseo set the folder down and slid it across the desk toward her. "Then tell me his name," he said. Hope stared at the folder as if it were a weapon. "I don't understand." "You do," he said quietly. "The man who gave your daughter my blood." Hope's vision blurred. Her knees nearly gave out, but she held herself upright through sheer will. "That is not true," she whispered. Junseo's voice hardened. "Don't lie to me." Hope lifted her head. For the first time, she met his eyes fully. No bow, no deference. I have lied to protect my child, she said, voice shaking but strong. I will not lie to protect you. Something flickered in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. His name, Jun Seo said again. Hope closed her eyes. The past surged forward like a wave she had barely survived. He was called Junho, she said softly. The name landed like a gunshot. Jun Seo went still, his face drained of color. Say that again. Junho, Hope repeated. That was his name. The silence that followed was suffocating. Jun Seo turned away, gripping the edge of the desk so tightly his knuckles whitened. Impossible, he muttered. Hope swallowed. I didn't know who he was when I met him. He didn't tell me. He said he was a student. He said he wanted to escape his family. Jun Seo let out a harsh laugh. He always did. Hope's chest tightened. You knew him, she said. He didn't answer. You loved him, she added. Jun Seo's shoulders stiffened. He was my brother, he said. The words fell heavy and irrevocable between them. Hope's breath hitched. She sank into the chair without realizing she was moving. Oh God, she whispered. Jun Seo turned back to her, eyes dark and raw. My younger brother, he continued. The one who disappeared 8 years ago. The one I spent millions trying to find. The one whose body was never recovered. Hope pressed a hand to her mouth. I didn't know, she said, tears spilling freely now. I swear to you, if I had known, it wouldn't have changed anything, Jun Seo said sharply. He would have loved you anyway. Hope looked up at him, startled. You knew he loved me? Jun Seo's jaw clenched. He talked about you, he said. Not by name, but he talked about a woman who prayed. A woman who believed in things he thought he'd lost. Hope's sob broke free. He was kind, she said. He was afraid, but he was kind. He wanted to be good. Jun Seo's eyes burned. So did I, he said quietly. They sat in the wreckage of that truth, two survivors of the same man's absence, bound by grief they had never shared before. Finally, Jun Seo spoke again. She's mine, he said. Hope stiffened instantly. No, she said, voice firm. She is my daughter. She is my niece, he corrected. Hope stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. You do not get to claim her because of blood, she said fiercely. You did not carry her. You did not feed her. You did not pray over her when she was sick or cry when she asked why she didn't have a father. Jun Seo stepped closer. And you don't get to hide her from me, he said. Not anymore. Hope's hand shook. You will not take her, she said. I will disappear before I let that happen. Jun Seo stopped in front of her. I won't take her, he said quietly. I'll protect her. Hope laughed bitterly. From what? From you. He flinched. From my enemies, he said. From a world that would eat her alive if it knew who she was. Hope's eyes narrowed. Then leave us alone. I can't, he said. Why? Because I already love her, he didn't say. Because she's the last piece of my brother that still breathes, he didn't say. Instead, he said, because blood remembers. Hope wiped her tears with shaking hands. My daughter will not be raised in violence, she said. She will not grow up afraid. She will not learn that power comes from fear. Jun Seo studied her. Then, unexpectedly, he nodded. She won't, he said. I promise. Hope's heart ached with the weight of disbelief. You promise like a man who has broken many, she said softly. Yes, he admitted, but not this one. Hope stared at him, this man of shadows and scars, holding on to a promise like it might redeem him. And if I say no, she asked. Jun Seo was quiet for a long time. Then he said, then I will wait. Hope blinked. Wait. I waited 8 years for my brother, he said. I can wait longer for his child. Hope's resolve wavered. Waiting was not what she had expected. Threats, yes. Force, yes. But patience? That was dangerous. Because patience could look like love. And love could make you forget what a man was capable of. Hope took a shaky breath. I will not bring her here, she said. And you will not come to her again without my permission. Jun Seo inclined his head slightly. Agreed. Hope stared at him, stunned. You agree? For now, he said. Hope exhaled, unsure whether she had won or lost something precious. She picked up her bag. I'm leaving early, she said. Yes, he replied. I'll have a driver take you. No, she said quickly. I go alone. Jun Seo watched her go, the door closing softly behind her. For the first time in years, Kong Junseo sat down and did nothing. Because somewhere in the city, his brother's daughter was breathing. And God, whom he had ignored, challenged, and half believed in, had just returned something he thought was gone forever. Hope walked out of the estate with legs that barely held her. The world looked the same, but nothing was. She had crossed a line that could not be erased. And now, tied to her life was a man who ruled with fear, and a child who might one day rule his heart. Hope felt the weight of being known long before she felt safe again. Days passed. The world did not explode. No black cars waited outside her apartment. No threats arrived in whispered phone calls. No men followed her down alleyways or stood too close on subway platforms. And that was what frightened her most. Because Kong Junseo had said he would wait. And men like him did not wait without purpose. Hope returned to the estate the next morning, heart hammering as she approached the gates. She prayed longer than usual, fingers trembling around her bag strap. Nothing had changed. The guards nodded as always. The doors opened as always. The house received her like a mouth that knew her shape. But he did not appear. Not once. Hope cleaned in silence, alert to every sound, every shadow. She passed his study closed, his office empty. His presence lingered only in the way the air felt heavier, like the house itself remembered him even when he was gone. When she left early, as usual, there was no message, no summons, no word. Hope should have been relieved. Instead, unease settled into her bones. Kong Junseo watched from 3 blocks away, not through binoculars, not from a car that would draw attention. He stood outside a small convenience store, hands in his coat pockets, blending into the city in a way only men who understood violence truly could. Across the street was the daycare. Bright walls, painted animals, laughter spilling out every time the door opened. A place he did not belong. He watched the door and waited. When Hope appeared, his chest tightened. She looked smaller here, not diminished, just unarmored. No uniform, no silence shaped by employment. She wore a simple coat, her hair wrapped in a scarf, her face bare pretense. She smiled when the door opened, and then the child ran out. Adeola. The name echoed in his mind like a prayer he didn't know how to say. She ran straight into Hope's arms, her laughter bright enough to hurt. Junseo felt something crack, not gently, violently, because he had imagined her face 1,000 ways, and none of them prepared him for how alive she looked. She had Junho's smile, not his guarded one, the free one, the one Junseo had forgotten existed. Hope knelt to adjust Adela's backpack, brushing her fingers over her cheek with practiced tenderness. Adeola talked animatedly, hands moving, body buzzing with energy. Junseo watched the way Hope listened, fully, like the world paused when her child spoke. A strange, unfamiliar ache spread through his chest. "This is what you stole from yourself," a voice whispered. Not God's, his brother's. Hope felt it before she saw him. That prickle at the back of her neck, that tightening behind her ribs. She turned slightly, scanning the street. And there he was, not close, not approaching, just there, watching. Hope's steps faltered. Adeola tugged her hand. "Mama." Hope forced her expression smooth. "Yes, my love. Who's that man?" Adeola asked, peering in the same direction. Hope's heart slammed. She followed Adela's gaze and saw Junseo's eyes lift. Straight to Adeola. The distance between them suddenly felt meaningless. Hope's grip tightened on her daughter's hand. "No one," she said too quickly. "Come." But Adeola had already tilted her head, curious. "He looks sad," she said. Hope swallowed hard. "Don't stare." Adeola frowned. "Why not?" "Because he will see you. Because if he sees you, he will never unsee you. Because men like him don't forget what they love." Hope steered her gently away. She did not look back. But Junseo did not move. He watched until they disappeared into the flow of the city. Only then did he exhale. That night, Hope dreamed of doors. Doors opening. Doors closing. Doors she held shut with bleeding hands. She woke with a gasp. Adeola curled against her side, warm and real and safe. Hope pressed her face into her daughter's hair and breathed. "You are mine," she whispered. "God gave you to me." Adeola murmured in her sleep and smiled. Hope didn't sleep again. The next Sunday, Hope went to church earlier than usual. She sat closer to the front, Adeola beside her, legs swinging. The small church was familiar, cracked walls, uneven pews, a choir that sang with more faith than harmony. Hope closed her eyes during worship. She needed grounding. She needed God to feel close again. She did not notice Juncio enter. He took a seat in the very back as always. But this time he did not sit alone. This time his eyes were drawn forward, to a child swaying slightly to the music, to small hands clapping off beat, to Hope's bowed head, lips moving in silent prayer. The pastor spoke about stewardship, about protecting what God entrusts to you, about love that requires sacrifice. Juncio felt every word land like an accusation. When the service ended, Hope stood to leave. She turned and froze. Their eyes met across the aisle. For one heartbeat, the church disappeared. Hope's stomach dropped. Juncio inclined his head, not in command, not in ownership, in acknowledgement. Hope gathered Adeola close and walked past him without a word. Juncio did not follow. He let them go. That restraint cost him more than any act of violence ever had. That evening, Hope found a note slipped under her apartment door. Her hand shook as she picked it up. The paper was plain, the handwriting precise. I will not approach her without you. I will not speak her name where it could be overheard. I will not claim what is not freely given. But I will not disappear. J*****. Hope sank onto the floor. She read it 3 times. This was not a threat. That was the problem. This was a man drawing a boundary and waiting for her to draw hers. Hope folded the note and pressed it to her chest. Lord, she whispered, tears spilling freely. What do you want from me? From the other room, Adela's voice floated out. Mama. Yes, my love. Can I pray for the sad man tonight? Hope closed her eyes. Yes, she said softly. You can. And somewhere across the city, Kong Juncio stood at his window, staring at a skyline that had never once made him feel small. Until now, because love had entered his world quietly, and it had Hope's eyes, and it was no longer something he could command. Hope noticed a car on Tuesday. It was black, low, unremarkable, exactly the kind of vehicle that blended into a city like Seoul without ever belonging to it. It sat across the street from Adela's daycare, engine off, windows dark. At first, Hope told herself it was nothing. Seoul was full of black cars. But when she picked Adeola up and walked past it, the driver didn't look at his phone, didn't smoke, didn't move. He watched them. Hope felt it like a hand closing around her throat. She smiled anyway. She always smiled in public. Fear had taught her that much. She chatted with Adeola, asked about her day, pointed out a stray cat near the curb. She did not run. She did not look back. But that night, she prayed longer than she ever had. Kong Juncio found out 3 hours later. Min Jae stood stiffly in his office, hands clasped behind his back. Sir, he said, someone has been asking questions. Juncio didn't look up from the document he was reading. About what? About you. Min Jae replied carefully. Specifically, about whether you have something to lose. The room went cold. Juncio set the paper down slowly. Who, he asked. Min Jae hesitated. The Baek faction. Juncio's jaw tightened. Baek Sung-hwan had been circling his territory for months, testing borders, provoking minor skirmishes, probing for weakness. A man who believed brutality was the same thing as strength. A child? Juncio asked quietly. Min Jae nodded. They don't know details, just that there may be leverage. Juncio stood. The air in the room seemed to recoil. Move all eyes, he said, voice deadly calm. On the daycare. On the apartment. On her. Min Jae swallowed. Sir, she asked for distance. Juncio's gaze snapped to him. Distance is a luxury, he said. Safety is not. Hope sensed the shift before she understood it. The streets felt wrong. Too many glances. Too many men who stood still when she passed. Her phone buzzed with an unknown number that didn't leave messages. And then, on Thursday afternoon, Adeola didn't come out when Hope arrived. 5 minutes passed. 10. Hope's chest tightened. She stepped inside, forcing calm. The caregiver looked flustered. "Oh, Miss Hope, there's been a small misunderstanding." Hope's heart began to race. "Where's my daughter?" The woman hesitated. "A man said he was sent by her uncle. He had all the correct information." The world tilted. "What man?" Hope demanded. The woman faltered. "He said his name was—" Hope didn't wait to hear it. She ran. Junseo arrived at the daycare at the same time she did. His car screeched to a halt. He was out before the engine died. Hope turned and saw him. For 1/2 second, relief washed through her. Then terror followed it. "You promised," she cried, rushing toward him. "You promised you wouldn't." "I didn't," he cut in sharply. "This wasn't me." Hope stopped short. "What?" Junseo's eyes were scanning everything. The street, the building, the faces, calculating, assessing, already at war. "Someone took her," he said, "and they did not have my permission." Hope's knees buckled. She would have fallen if he hadn't caught her. His hands were steady on her shoulders, grounding her even as panic tore through her chest. "Hope," he said, voice low but fierce, "look at me." She shook, tears streaming freely. "They took my baby," she sobbed. "They took her because of you." Junseo did not deny it. "Yes," he said, "and I will bring her back." Hope struck his chest with trembling fists. "She is not a bargaining chip. She is not your weakness. She is my family," he said. The word hit her harder than any blow. He pulled out his phone, already issuing commands. "Lock down Beck's routes. Cut communications. I want every camera, every dock, every warehouse." He turned back to Hope. "Get in the car." "No," she said, backing away. "I won't go with you." Junseo stepped closer, his voice dropping. "You will," he said, "because wherever they took her, I'm the only one they are afraid of." Hope's sob caught in her throat. She hated that he was right. Adeola was not afraid. Not yet. She sat in the back of a van, feet dangling, swinging slightly. The man in front of her didn't look at her. She clutched her backpack tightly. "Mister," she said after a while, "are you bad?" The man stiffened. "Be quiet." Adeola frowned. "Mama says bad people don't like questions." The man glanced back at her, then quickly away, like her eyes burned. She whispered anyway, "Jesus is with me." They found the warehouse at dusk. Junseo did not negotiate. He walked in alone. Beck Sungwon laughed when he saw him. "So it's true," Beck said. "You finally grew a heart." Junseo's expression was empty. "You touched something that belongs to me," he said. "There is no outcome where you leave alive." Beck gestured lazily. "You think I'd hurt a child? I'm not a monster." Junseo smiled. It was not a kind expression. "No," he said. "You're worse. You're careless." The fight was fast, brutal, efficient. Junseo moved like a man with nothing left to lose. By the time Hope arrived, escorted by men she didn't trust but had no choice to, the warehouse was quiet. Too quiet. She ran. "Diola!" Her voice echoed. And then, "Mama!" Hope collapsed to her knees as Adeola ran into her arms, unharmed, crying only because her mother was. Hope held her so tightly it hurt. "I've got you," she whispered over and over. "I've got you." Junseo watched from a distance. Blood stained his shirt. His hands were shaking, not from violence, from what almost happened. Later, as dawn crept in pale and hesitant, Hope sat beside Junseo on the hood of his car. Adeola slept inside, curled under a blanket, guarded by men who would die before letting harm reach her. Again, Hope broke the silence. "This is your world," she said quietly, "and now it has touched my child." "Yes," Junseo replied. She turned to him, eyes red but clear. "Then listen to me," she said. "If you earn her life, it will be on God's terms, not yours." He met her gaze. "For her," he said, "I will learn." Hope exhaled shakily. Somewhere deep inside, a truth settled she could no longer deny. She could not protect Adeola from Kong Junseo, only with him, and that frightened her more than anything she had faced before. The first thing Hope noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that settles after prayer or sleep, but the brittle hush that follows disaster when the world is unsure whether it is allowed to keep moving. Adeola slept on, curled on her side in the back seat, one thumb tucked in her fist lashes still wet from tears she wouldn't remember by morning. A blanket covered her small body, rising and falling with each steady breath. Hope hadn't let go of her hand since the warehouse. Not once. Now the sun crept slowly over the horizon, washing the city in pale gold, as if trying to pretend nothing terrible had happened. Hope stared out the windshield. Her body felt hollowed out, wrung dry by terror, relief, and a gratitude so sharp it hurt. She needs rest, Juncio said quietly from the driver's seat. Hope didn't look at him. She needs safety. Yes, he replied. That too. His voice was calm, but there was something brittle underneath it, like a man holding himself together by force of will alone. They sat there for a long moment, the engine idling. Finally, Hope spoke. I will not thank you, she said softly. Juncio nodded once. I didn't do it for thanks. You brought this danger to her. Hope continued, her voice steady but edged with pain. Even if you didn't mean to. I know. You killed people tonight. Yes. Hope closed her eyes. And yet, she whispered, my child is alive. She turned to him then, took him in fully. For the first time since the chaos ended. Blood stained the cuff of his sleeve. A cut traced his cheekbone, shallow but vivid. His eyes, those cold, terrifying eyes, looked exhausted. Not triumphant. Not proud. Just empty. You look like a man who lost something, Hope said. Juncio stared straight ahead. I lost my brother a second time. Hope's chest tightened. You saved his daughter. Yes, he said, but I showed her who I really am. Hope looked back at Adeola. She didn't see, she said. Children see what they are ready to see. Juncio's jaw tightened. One day, she will be ready. Hope nodded. That day will break her heart. So will lying to her, he replied. They fell silent again. Somewhere nearby, a bird began to sing. Hope almost laughed at the normalcy of it. They took Adeola home. Not to Hope's apartment. Juncio wouldn't allow it. Too exposed. Too many eyes. Hope argued until her throat burned, until tears came again, not from fear, but from rage. In the end, she agreed to stay somewhere else. Temporarily. A small guest house on the edge of the estate, separate from the main mansion. Simple. Quiet. Guarded without being watched. This does not mean I belong to you, Hope said as she laid Adeola down on a bed too large for her small body. Juncio stood in the doorway, hands clasped behind his back like he was afraid to touch anything. I know, he said. Hope turned on him sharply. Say it. He met her gaze. You don't belong to me. And she doesn't either. She doesn't. Hope studied his face, searching for deception. She found none. Only resolve. And something else, something that looked dangerously close to reverence. Hope turned away. Because reverence, when misplaced, could become obsession. And obsession destroyed everything it touched. That afternoon, Hope finally slept. She dreamed of water. Deep, dark water, and hands pulling her up just before she drowned. When she woke, sunlight streamed through the window. Adeola sat cross-legged on the bed beside her, whispering to her stuffed bear. Mama, she said happily, I made a new friend. Hope bolted upright. What? Adeola pointed. Juncio stood several feet away, awkward and uncertain, holding a small paper bag like he wasn't sure what to do with it. I didn't touch her, he said immediately. She woke up and came to the door. Hope's heart pounded. She looked at Adeola. You shouldn't leave the room without telling Mama. Adeola nodded solemnly. I know, but he looked lonely. Hope closed her eyes. Of course he did. Adeola hopped off the bed and tugged Juncio's sleeve gently. You didn't answer my question. He looked down at her. What question? Are you my uncle? The word hit the room like a bell. Hope's breath caught. Juncio knelt slowly, bringing himself to Adeola's height. Yes, he said quietly. I am. Adeola studied his face with intense seriousness. Did you know my daddy? Juncio's throat worked. Yes, he said. Very much. Adeola nodded, as if filing that away. Then you must be sad, she said. Juncio froze. Adeola reached out and placed her small hand on his cheek, right where the cut still burned. It's okay, she said gently. Jesus is close to sad people. Hope's vision blurred. Juncio did not move, did not breathe. Slowly his eyes closed. When he opened them again, they were wet. I hope so, he whispered. Adeola smiled and went back to her bear, satisfied. Hope sat frozen on the bed, heart pounding. That had not been planned. That had not been safe. And yet, she watched Jun Seo rise slowly, like a man afraid his legs wouldn't hold him. "She's extraordinary," he said quietly. Hope swallowed. "She is a child." "Yes," he replied, "and somehow stronger than me." Hope said nothing, because it was true. That evening, Hope stood alone in the small guest house kitchen, staring at the Bible open in her hands. She had read the same passage over and over without seeing it. "Do not be afraid of those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul." She laughed softly, bitter and tired. "Easy for you to say," she whispered. A knock sounded at the door. Hope stiffened. "Yes," she called. "It's me," Jun Seo said. "I brought food." And an apology. Hope hesitated, then opened the door. He stood there holding 2 containers, his posture careful, like he knew he was walking on sacred ground. "I'm listening," she said. He exhaled. "I'm sorry I followed you," he said. "I'm sorry I watched your child without your permission. I'm sorry I brought danger to your door. And I'm sorry that my world touched hers at all." Hope stared at him. "Those are not small apologies," she said. "No," he replied. "They're the truth." Hope stepped aside. "Come in," she said quietly. They ate in silence. Adeola chattered happily, unaware of the weight between the adults. After she fell asleep again, Hope and Jun Seo sat across from each other, the air thick with words neither knew how to say. "You could leave," Hope said finally. "Disappear. Let us go." Jun Seo shook his head. "They would still come." Hope sighed. "So this is my life now." Jun Seo leaned forward. "No," he said. "This is mine." Hope looked up sharply. "I won't let your child grow up hunted," he continued. "If that means dismantling everything I built, then I will." Hope's breath caught. "You would give up power?" she asked. "For her," he said. "Yes." Hope searched his face, and for the first time since meeting him, she saw something unmistakable. Not fear, not violence, repentance. Tears slipped down her cheeks. "Then you must learn something first," she said softly. "What?" "How to kneel," Hope replied. Jun Seo did not hesitate. He slid from his chair to the floor. Hope's heart broke open. She knelt beside him, and together, housekeeper and kingpin, mother and uncle, sinner and saint, they bowed their heads. Hope prayed, not for safety, not for protection, but for transformation. In the quiet that followed, something old and hard inside, Kong Jun Seo finally began to crack. The first thing Kong Jun Seo did was nothing. That in itself was a kind of violence. For years, his life had been motion, orders given, territory claimed, consequences enforced before hesitation could weaken him. Stillness had never been an option. Stillness meant vulnerability. Stillness meant memory. But after that prayer, after kneeling on a floor that had never known him, after a child had touched his face like she wasn't afraid of what he was, Jun Seo stopped. He did not call his men. He did not issue commands. He sat alone in his office before dawn. The city stretched beneath him like an old battlefield, and let the silence press in. Power hummed in the walls around him. Screens glowed. Phones waited. He turned them all off. Hope woke early, as she always did. For one terrifying moment, she forgot where she was. The bed was too large, the ceiling unfamiliar. Then memory rushed back. The warehouse, the blood, the way Adeola had run into her arms like life itself had returned. Hope sat up slowly. Adeola slept curled like a comma, peaceful. Hope touched her cheek, just to reassure herself she was warm and breathing. Then she knelt beside the bed, not because she felt strong, but because she didn't. "Lord," she whispered, "I don't know how to live in the aftermath. I know how to survive. I know how to endure, but I don't know how to stay." She waited. No voice answered, but a strange calm settled in her chest. Not certainty, not relief, just enough steadiness to stand. The cost began quietly. It always did. Jun Seo summoned Min-jae just after sunrise. Min-jae entered the office already braced. He had seen that stillness before, once years ago, when a war had ended and something worse had begun. "You've heard the rumors," Jun Seo said. "Yes, sir. They're true." Min-jae swallowed. "All of them?" "Yes." Silence stretched. Finally, Min-jae said, carefully, "You're dismantling everything." Jun-seo didn't correct him. "The docks are gone. The routes rerouted. The accounts frozen. Our allies are nervous. Our enemies are circling." "I know." Min-jae took a breath. "Why?" Jun-seo looked out the window. "Because a child was taken," he said quietly, "and she came back alive only because God was merciful." Min-jae's voice dropped. "Sir, mercy doesn't protect men like us." Jun-seo turned. His gaze was calm. "No," he said, "but it protects children. And that's the point." Min-jae bowed his head. "When will you stop?" he asked. Jun-seo considered the question. "When there's nothing left to poison her world," he said. "Including me." Hope noticed the changes before she understood them. The guards outside the guest house were fewer, quieter, less watchful, more respectful. The estate itself felt different, less tense, less alive with the undercurrent of threat. She asked no questions. She cooked simple meals. She walked Adeola through the gardens. She taught her daughter how to pray without fear, how to ask God questions without demanding answers. Adeola thrived in the space. That frightened Hope too. Children adapted quickly. Too quickly. "Mama," Adeola said one afternoon, swinging her legs as Hope braided her hair. "Is Uncle June sad because he's sick?" Hope paused. "No," she said gently. "He's sad because he's changing." Adeola frowned. "Does changing hurt?" "Yes," Hope replied. "Sometimes." Adeola nodded thoughtfully. "Then we should be kind to him." Hope's throat tightened. "Yes," she said softly. "We should." They crossed paths more often. Not deliberately. Jun-seo never sought Adeola out. Never approached her without Hope present. Never assumed permission. That restraint cost him more than obedience ever had. Hope saw it in the way he stood apart. In the way his hands folded behind his back like a man afraid to reach for what mattered. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the estate in gold, Hope found him sitting alone on the steps outside the main house. He looked smaller there, not weak, just human. She hesitated, then sat beside him. "You're bleeding money," she said quietly. He smiled faintly. "I noticed. You're bleeding allies." "Yes. You're bleeding safety." Jun-seo exhaled. "That one is harder." Hope studied his face. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, "Because if I don't," he said, "she will grow up believing the world is shaped by men like me." Hope's voice was barely a whisper. "And if you do, then she might believe it can be shaped by something better." Hope nodded slowly. "That belief will cost her too," she said. "I know." They sat in silence, watching the light fade. After a while, Hope spoke again. "You don't need to disappear," she said. "You just need to be honest." Jun-seo looked at her sharply. "With whom?" he asked. "With yourself," Hope replied. "And one day with her." His chest tightened. "That day terrifies me." Hope met his gaze. "Good. That means you understand the weight of her life." The backlash came in whispers, not explosions. Contracts dissolved. Names stopped answering calls. A warning was delivered in the form of a burned warehouse. Empty, symbolic, restrained. Jun-seo accepted it without retaliation. That, more than anything, unsettled his enemies. A king who refused to fight was more dangerous than one who loved war. But Jun-seo did not return to the battlefield. He came home instead. Hope watched him one night from the guest house window as he stood alone beneath the stars. A man who had once ruled shadows now stood exposed to the sky. She realized then that staying was costing him more than leaving ever could. And staying was costing her too. Because trust was no longer theoretical. It was becoming real. And real trust asked things of you. Hope pressed her palm to the glass and whispered a prayer she had been avoiding. "Lord, if you are redeeming him, give me wisdom." Not fear, not blindness. Wisdom. Behind her, Adeola slept peacefully. Between them, a man was dismantling his life one choice at a time. And the cost, quiet, relentless, unavoidable, was reshaping all three of them. Not into something perfect, but into something true. The first time Adeola asked about her father, Hope did not answer. She was washing dishes, the warm water running over her hands, steam fogging the window. Adeola sat at the small kitchen table in the guest house, coloring carefully inside the lines, something she had only recently learned to do. "Mama," Adeola said again, her voice light, curious, unafraid. Hope closed her eyes. "Yes, my love. Why doesn't my daddy live with us?" The question was not sharp. It wasn't wounded. It was simply ready. Hope dried her hands slowly, buying herself time. She had always known this day would come. She just hadn't known it would come now, when the ground beneath them was still shifting. She sat across from Adeola and folded her hands. "Your father loved you," Hope said carefully. "Very much." Adeola tilted her head. "Did he love you?" Hope smiled faintly. "Yes." "Then why did he go away?" Hope inhaled. "Because sometimes," she said softly, "people are born into storms they don't choose. And some storms are very hard to survive." Adeola considered this, her brow furrowing. "Did the storm hurt him?" "Yes," Hope said. "Very badly." Adeola nodded slowly. Then, with the simple mercy of a child, she asked, "Is he with Jesus now?" Hope's throat tightened. "Yes," she said. "I believe he is." Adeola accepted that answer without resistance. She picked up her crayon again. "Okay," she said. "Then Uncle June must miss him a lot." Hope stilled. "You know Uncle June is his brother?" Hope asked gently. Adeola looked up, surprised. "He is?" "Yes." Adeola's eyes widened, not with fear but wonder. "Oh," she said. "That's why he looks like me." Hope laughed softly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "That's why." That night, Hope asked Juncio to come, not to the mansion, to the guest house. He arrived quietly, as he always did now, as if afraid of disturbing something sacred. Adeola was already asleep. Hope poured tea they didn't drink and sat across from him, her Bible open between them like a witness. She asked about her father today, Hope said. Juncio's chest tightened. "And I told her the truth," Hope replied, as much as she could hold. Juncio nodded slowly. "Thank you." Hope studied his face. The lines that had deepened, the sharpness that had softened, the weight that still sat heavy behind his eyes. "She knows you are her uncle," Hope continued. He closed his eyes briefly. "Does she hate me?" Hope shook her head. "She feels safe with you." The word landed hard. "Safe." Juncio swallowed. "Then I don't deserve her." Hope leaned forward slightly. "None of us deserve children," she said. "That's why they're grace, not reward." Silence settled between them. Then Juncio spoke, his voice low and steady. "There is something you need to know," he said. "Something I can no longer hide." Hope nodded. "Go on." "I have turned over evidence," he said. "Accounts, routes, names." Hope's breath caught. "To whom?" "The authorities," he replied. "Through intermediaries." Quietly, Hope stared at him. "You're confessing." "Yes." "What?" "Because Adeola will grow up asking what kind of man her uncle was," he said. "And I refuse to let the answer be a lie." Hope's hands trembled. "You know what this will cost you," she said. "Yes." "Prison," she whispered. "Yes." Hope closed her eyes. She had prayed for his redemption. She hadn't expected it to look like this. "When?" she asked. "Sometime soon," he replied. "Before the world notices what I'm dismantling." Hope stood and walked to the window, staring out into the dark. "I never asked you to sacrifice yourself," she said. "No," he replied. "You asked me to kneel." Hope turned back to him, tears in her eyes. "And Adeola?" she asked. "What happens to her when you're gone?" Juncio's voice broke, just slightly. "She lives free," he said. "That's what happens." Hope crossed the room and knelt in front of him. "You will not disappear from her life," she said firmly. "Not like that." He looked at her, startled. "I won't let her believe everyone she loves leaves," Hope continued. "If you must face consequences, you will do it honestly. You will write. You will speak. You will remain present in every way that does not harm her." Juncio's eyes burned. "You would allow that?" he asked. Hope nodded. "Because redemption is not absence. It is accountability." Juncio bowed his head. For the first time, he cried without shame. The day came quietly. No headlines, no chows, just a black car arriving, not to threaten, but to take. Hope stood with Adeola at the edge of the garden as Juncio prepared to leave. Adeola held her stuffed bear and watched him with solemn eyes. "Are you going on a trip?" she asked. "Yes," Juncio said, kneeling in front of her. "A long one. Will you come back?" Juncio looked at Hope. Hope nodded once. "Yes," he said, "if God allows." Adeola considered this, then stepped forward and hugged him, small arms around his neck, fierce and certain. "Don't be scared," she whispered. "Jesus will sit with you." Juncio closed his eyes. "I believe that," he said. He stood, looked once more at Hope. "Thank you," he said simply. Hope's voice shook. "Go with God." He left without looking back. That night, Hope tucked Adeola into bed and sat beside her long after she slept. The world felt strange, lighter, heavier, quieter. Hope opened her Bible and read aloud softly, words filling the room like breath. Outside, the estate rested under the stars. Inside, a child slept unafraid. And somewhere not far away, a man was walking toward judgment with his head held high. Not because he was innocent, but because he was finally honest. Only one chapter remained. Not to explain, not to justify, but to rest. Hope woke before dawn. She always did. Even now, especially now, her body remembered the hour when quiet felt holy. She slipped from bed without waking Adeola, wrapped a cardigan around her shoulders, and stepped into the small kitchen. The guest house was still. No guards outside anymore. No tension humming in the walls. Just birds beginning to stir and the faint, clean promise of morning. Hope boiled water for tea and opened her Bible at the table where she had learned how to breathe again. She did not rush the prayer. She did not beg. She simply spoke. "Thank you," she whispered, "for keeping us, for not wasting pain, for staying." The sun rose slowly, light spilling across the floor like forgiveness. Life did not become easy, but it became honest. They moved out of the estate 3 months later, quietly, without ceremony. A small house near the river replaced the guest house, modest and warm, filled with laughter and sunlight and the smell of food cooked with care instead of urgency. Hope found work again, not as a housekeeper, as a caregiver at a community center, cleaning, yes, but also teaching, listening, praying with women who carried their own silent wars. She walked to work now. She waved at neighbors. She learned the rhythms of a life that did not require vigilance to survive. Adeola started school. She learned how to read faster than anyone expected. She asked too many questions. She made friends easily and forgave quickly. Every Sunday, she sat beside Hope in church and sang louder than the choir. When she prayed, she always added one more line. "And please be with Uncle June." Hope never corrected her. The letters came once a month, carefully written, never excuses, never self-pity. Juncio wrote about books he was reading, about men he was learning to listen to instead of command, about silence, and how loud it was at first. He never asked for forgiveness. He thanked Hope for teaching him how to kneel. Adeola drew pictures in response. Crayon suns, stick figures holding hands, hearts that looked more like flowers. Hope mailed them all. She told Adeola the truth as she grew, gently, age by age, that her father had been brave and broken, that her uncle had chosen to be honest when it cost him everything, that God was not a shield from suffering, but a companion through it. Adeola listened. She held those truths like stones in her pocket, solid, grounding, not heavy. One morning, a year later, Hope stood at the window as Adeola tied her shoes. "Mama," Adeola asked. "Yes, my love. Do you think Uncle June is proud of us?" Hope smiled. "Yes," she said. "I think he is." Adeola grinned. "Good, because I'm proud of him." Hope's eyes burned. She blinked back tears and reached for her bag. "Come," she said. "We'll be late." They stepped out into the morning together. The river shimmered nearby. The air was clean. The day waited. Somewhere else, in a place with high walls and narrow windows, Kong Juncio stood in a shaft of sunlight during morning count. He held a folded piece of paper in his hand, a drawing of a small house with a cross on the roof and 3 figures standing outside. One tall, one medium, one very small. At the bottom, written in careful, uneven letters, "This is our house with morning light." Juncio pressed the paper to his chest. He closed his eyes. For the first time in his life, he did not feel powerful. He felt free. And in a quiet neighborhood by the river, a woman and her child walked into a new day, not untouched by darkness, but no longer ruled by it. Hope lifted her face to the sun. "Lord," she whispered, "we're still here." And the morning answered. Dear viewers, if you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, share to someone, and subscribe for more entertaining stories like this. Thank you for watching.